Every dollar in your wallet is a lie. Not a scam. A lie everyone agreed to believe. There was never a moment when humans sat down and invented money, the way you learned in school. No neat trade of chickens for shoes. Historians who studied ancient societies never found a single culture that ran purely on barter. What they found instead was something stranger. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why money isn't really about gold, coins, or cash at all. It's about something far more fragile. Trust. And trust almost broke this system more times than you'd think. Around 3000 BCE, in the cities of ancient Mesopotamia, people didn't trade goods directly. They kept track. Temple workers pressed marks into wet clay tablets, recording who owed what to whom. Grain, livestock, labor. This wasn't currency. It was memory. A community small enough that everyone knew everyone could survive on debt and reputation alone. But here's the problem. That system only worked if you knew the person you were dealing with. The moment trade crossed into unfamiliar territory, with strangers who had no reason to trust your word, the whole system collapsed. So people needed something a stranger could trust on sight. Something with value everyone already recognized. Cattle, salt, grain, and eventually, in parts of Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, small ocean shells called cowries. For centuries, these shells functioned as real currency across entire continents. But think about carrying a herd of cattle to pay for something. Or a sack of salt that dissolves in the rain. These early currencies solved the stranger problem, but they created a new one. Nothing about them was easy to carry, divide, or protect. Metal solved part of that. Gold and silver could be melted, shaped, and divided into smaller pieces. They didn't rot. They didn't die. But every single transaction still required weighing the metal and checking its purity every single time. And that opened the door to fraud. Mixing cheaper metals into the mix, shaving edges off coins without anyone noticing. So the question became, how do you make people trust a piece of metal without weighing it every time they use it? The answer showed up around the 7th century BCE, in the kingdom of Lydia, in what is now western Turkey. A king named Aliats, and later his son Croesus, whose wealth became so legendary it inspired the phrase "rich as Croesus," began stamping metal with an official mark. That stamp was a guarantee. It told anyone who saw it, this coin has been verified, you can trust its weight and purity. It was one of the first times an institution, not just a person, backed the value of money. But there was still a hard limit. You could only carry as much wealth as you could physically lift. And that limit became dangerous. Merchants traveling long distances with sacks of coins were easy targets for robbery. So thousands of miles away, in Tang and Song dynasty China, around the 7th to 11th centuries, merchants started leaving their heavy coins with trusted brokers in one city and carrying a paper receipt instead, receipts they could redeem for coins in another city entirely. People called it flying money because it let wealth travel without ever being carried. But that convenience raised an unsettling question. What happens the day someone hands you a piece of paper backed by nothing at all? That question came true faster than anyone expected. The Song government eventually took over issuing this paper currency directly, making it the first government-backed paper money in recorded history. And if you're wondering whether it worked, subscribe because it's about to get a lot messy, right as the story is heading toward its biggest turning point. The government discovered something dangerous. Paper is cheap to print. Under later dynasties, especially the Yuan, so much paper money got printed that its value collapsed. Prices spiraled. The very tool built to make trade easier had become the thing tearing the economy apart. It would take Europe centuries to relearn this lesson the hard way. In 17th century London, people didn't trust banks. They trusted goldsmiths, because goldsmiths had strong vaults. People started storing their gold with a goldsmith and carrying a written receipt instead. One goldsmith, a fairly ordinary tradesman with no formal banking training, noticed something quietly extraordinary. Not everyone came to withdraw their gold at the same time. So he started issuing more receipts than the gold he actually held in the vault, quietly lending out the difference for profit. No law created this idea. One person's shortcut had just invented the foundation of modern banking, almost by accident. This idea needed an institution big enough and trusted enough to make it official. In 1694, the Bank of England was founded, not to help ordinary people, but to help the English government borrow money to fund a war. In exchange, the bank got the right to issue paper notes backed by public trust in the government itself. For the first time, money wasn't backed by something you could hold in your hand. It was backed by a promise. But a promise only works as long as people believe the one who made it can keep it. So what happens when that belief gets tested? For the next 2 centuries, most of the world tied its paper money back to gold anyway, just to be safe, a system known as the gold standard. It gave international trade a shared, stable measuring stick. But it came with a rigid catch. A country could only issue as much money as the gold sitting in its vaults. During economic crises, especially the Great Depression of the 1930s, that rigidity became a trap. Governments couldn't pump more money into a collapsing economy, even when doing so might have saved it. In 1933, facing a spiraling economic crisis, President Franklin D. Roosevelt ordered Americans to hand over most of their private gold to the government, loosening the direct tie between the dollar and gold at home. Then in 1944, at a conference in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, the world's major economies agreed on a new plan. The US dollar would stay linked to gold, and other currencies would be pegged to the dollar instead. It stabilized the post-war world. But it quietly rested the entire global financial system on the assumption that the United States actually had enough gold to back every dollar circulating on Earth. By the late 1960s, that assumption started cracking. Other countries began asking the US to redeem their dollars for real gold, and demand was rising faster than American gold reserves could handle. Economists debated. Foreign governments grew nervous. And on August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon went on television and did something almost unthinkable. He severed the dollar's last tie to gold permanently. Overnight, the money in your pocket stopped being a claim on anything physical at all. Many experts at the time genuinely feared the entire system might unravel within months. It didn't collapse. Instead, something almost stranger happened. The US dollar became the most trusted currency on Earth, not because of gold sitting in a vault somewhere, but because of confidence in American institutions, markets, and military and economic power. Which brings us back to the question this video opened with. Money was never really gold, coins, or paper. From those clay tablets in Mesopotamia to the dollar in your pocket right now, money has always been the same thing wearing different disguises. A shared belief, held together by nothing but collective trust. And that pattern hasn't stopped. Today, that same trust is being tested again, in the form of digital currencies and cryptocurrencies. New attempts to solve the very same ancient problem in a new way. How do strangers trust each other without a king, a bank, or a government standing behind them? Every era in this story followed the same rhythm. A solution to one problem quietly created the next one. And every single time, humans found a new story to believe in. So the next time you hand over a card, or tap your phone to pay for coffee, remember what's actually happening. You're not exchanging metal or paper. You're taking part in humanity's oldest, longest-running agreement, a story so convincing, billions of people live inside it every single day without ever questioning it. Money was never the invention. Trust was. And that might be the most human invention of all.